Good evening, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about dividing real numbers. And I know you know a lot of this, but we're going to just review some of the really important skills that you've learned in your previous math classes. So dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by a half. Well, you guys have asked some great questions this week. You've asked me, is 1/2 x the same thing as x over 2? Well, yes, because dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. All right, so dividing by 5 is the same as multiplying by 1/5. So could you write what you think that is, would look like with a variable? Okay, I'll give you a second. So I'm hoping you see that 1/5 of x is the same thing as x divided by 5, making sure that that variable is in the numerator. All right, well, that's actually basically the definition, guys, of division. The definition of division is that A divided by B, sorry that this isn't looking so great, so A divided by B is the same thing as A times 1 over B. Now let's look at B and 1 over B. What are those? B and 1 over B. We talked about that the other day. Those are reciprocals. Okay? All right, so we're going to practice this a little bit. But first, we're going to also talk about the rules of integers. So let's move up and let's talk about my hashtag rules for integers. That means positives and negatives. All right, so I do know that you already know a negative times a negative equals a positive. So a negative times a negative equals a positive. A negative divided by a negative is also a positive. Those are all rules you already know. Let's just review again, though, that a negative times a positive gives me a negative. So negative 2 times 3 is going to give me negative 6. All right, a negative divided by a positive will also yield me a negative. So negative 5 divided by 10. That's going to give me negative 1/2. Okay, let's keep going. Let's practice, okay? So let's practice negative 9 divided by negative 10/3. All right, so let's talk about what that means. That means negative 9 times the reciprocal of that number, okay? So the reciprocal of that number would be negative 3 over 10. Okay, so negative 9 divided by negative 10 over 3 is the same thing as negative 9 times negative 3 over 10, which is going to give me positive 27 over 10, which is 2 7/10. Now, one thing that I always say when I'm dividing fractions or dividing numbers that deal with fractions, I always say to keep the first number, change, meaning change from division to multiplication, and then flip 10/3. So keep, change, flip. Kentucky chicken, fry it. Kentucky chicken, fry it. Okay? All right, let's look at an example with a bar. Usually I don't use that division symbol anymore, do I? We don't really see that all too much. What you are going to see is that fraction bar, and remember that that fraction bar means division. Okay? So if we follow KCF, we keep negative 3. We change the division to multiplication. Now I'm using the X, but I haven't used that in a long time, have I? And then I flip what's on the bottom. So negative 1/3 becomes negative 3 over 1. All right, negative 3 times negative 3 gives me negative 9. Now, yeah, there's that 1, but we're not going to write a number over 1 anymore. We're going to just write it as the whole number. Oops, and I got a positive. I mean, you guys hopefully caught me on that one. Negative times negative gives me a positive. Negative times negative gives me a positive. All right, let's go on to some important rules that I want you to really consider. You can never divide by 0. Never. Thou shalt not divide by 0. So that means if you have 2 over 0, if something simplifies to that, this cannot happen. So we would say no solution, okay? And then we're going to use the term undefined in the future, so I'll mention it. But right now you can't divide by 0. However, You can divide 0 by any number. That would be something like 0 over 5, okay? 0 over 5 you are allowed to do because how many times does 5 go into 0? Well, it goes 0 times. These two rules are really important and kids forget them, so I really want you to pay attention to those when you get them. Make sure you recognize the difference. So 0 in the denominator, so I always say this, 0 under, meaning under that fraction bar, 0 under is undefined, doesn't exist, okay? All right, now we have a caution. That's our big caution, but we have another caution. Our other caution is for all real numbers, means that any real number you put in to these types of examples, for any real numbers, a plus b over c, a plus b over c means a over c plus b over c. And the same thing is true for subtraction. A minus b over c equals a over c minus b over c. We actually talked about an example of this in class the other day, okay? So I'm going to pull up that example. Hold on one second. Here's the example. 12 over x minus 8. I said that you have to be very, very careful. And if you remember, I said if you do something like this, you have to make sure that you simplify both to everything in the expression in the numerator. And that's because this means this. So you have to make sure that you divide any term in the numerator by that denominator. So you would get 6x minus 4. Really important. What tends to happen, not correct, is that kids think that once they've divided 12x minus 8 over 2, if they divide it to the 2, they think it's gone, and so it's 6x minus 8. And that is not the case, and something I really want you to be careful of, and we'll do some practice in class tomorrow, okay? All right. All right, so we're going to evaluate. We're going to evaluate when b equals negative 2, a equals, how about negative 3, c equals negative 1, and d equals, how about, I don't know, 4. Sorry, 4. All right. So this just means evaluate. So we're plugging them in. And remember I said anytime you plug something into an equation, put it in parentheses. All right, so we have b, negative 2, times c, negative 1, times d, which is 4. Okay? All over 1 minus b, I'm going to put it in parentheses, times a, which is negative 3. I'm going to make another bracket there. Now, the one thing I don't want you to forget is that the fraction bar is a grouping symbol. So that means that you actually have to do everything in the numerator and then deal with the denominator. Okay, so we've got negative 2 times negative 1, which is 2. 2 times 4 is 8. Okay, so we've got 8. And then we've got to do our parentheses first in the bottom. So 1 minus negative 2 becomes 1 plus 2. So 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 times negative 3 gives me negative 9. Okay? So make sure you do the numerator, the denominator, and then if you can, you can simplify the fraction once you get to the answer. All right, now I did notice that I wrote the negative in the bottom. I really don't want you writing negatives in the numerator or in the denominator. What I'd like to see is that you pull it out into the front because it's the whole quantity that's negative, okay? All right, so tomorrow, guys, we will be practicing all this. I hope you have a great night. All right, bye-bye.